Long before she had been given the nicknames the Blonde Butcher, Tiger Woman, and the Trunk Murderess, well before she became a proverbial boogeyman parents used to scare their children in behaving, lest the Trunk Murderess get them. Before she was the subject of a school children's rhyme that ended with the line, "And she'll chop you up to pieces," and before she became the only suspect in the most heinous murder case America had seen since Lizzie Borden. She was simply Winifred Ruth McKinnell. But those who knew her best called her Ruth, or Ruthie. Ruth was born on January 29th of 1905 in Oxford, Indiana, to parents Reverend H. McKinnell and his wife Carrie. It was blizzarding the day she was born. The cold was so intense that poor Ruth chilled at birth, meaning her tiny body's temperature dropped well below normal. She needed immediate medical intervention. The difficult struggle with which she entered this world would unfortunately foreshadow the rest of her life. From her body's chill, she contracted pneumonia, leaving her infant lungs permanently weakened. Sadly, they would never recover. At the tender age of 4, Ruth contracted tuberculosis and would never be the same. She was left weak and tired. School was difficult for Ruth. Her learning was often impeded by her illness. Life may have unfairly burdened her with a debilitating illness at an early age, but it tried to make up for that by providing Ruth with a wonderful family. She loved her younger brother and her parents very much. She always spoke so highly of them. Her father was a minister at their Methodist church. She and the entire congregation regarded him as caring and supportive. Ruth herself was also deeply involved in her father's church. She would help him deliver lectures and teach Sunday school. Ruth's mother was a school teacher. Carrie McKinnell may have been a bit timid, but she never shied away from helping anyone who needed her, no matter the sacrifice. She was a tirelessly hardworking woman. Ruth was surrounded by love, but she was also sheltered and grew up in a stricter home than most children. She did not get to attend ball games or movies or go to carnivals and skating rinks. Because of this, she never really fit in at school. But worse, she never got exposure to people outside of her small church congregation. It left her inexperienced, naive, and overly trusting. This was perhaps the one and only way her parents failed her. They failed to prepare her for life in the real world. This naivety would come back to haunt Ruth in the worst ways. This would manifest first in her marriage to Dr. William C. Judd in 1924. He was a man more than 20 years her senior. She was only 18. Dr. Judd was a veteran from the First World War. Ruth thought she had landed the American dream. She had married a doctor who could provide for her while she raised their children. But the reality would be far from it. Dr. Judd had sustained life-altering injuries during the war, leaving him reliant on painkillers. The reliance turned to addiction, leaving Dr. Judd unable to hold down a job. He moved Ruth out to Mexico as it was the only place he could find work. And they were happy at first. Ruth even became pregnant with the baby that she always wanted. But it was not to be. Her tuberculosis became so bad that her body could not sustain the pregnancy. She lost that baby and the next. Ruth would spend the next couple of years going back and forth between living in Mexico and living in a sanitarium in California, until finally, in June of 1930, she moved to Phoenix in hopes that the dry desert air would improve her health. Dr. Judd would go to Phoenix with her sporadically and for short periods of time, but most of the time, he was living between Mexico and California, trying to find work. This left Ruth completely on her own in a city she had never been before. Phoenix in 1930 was nothing like it is today. It may be hard to believe, but Phoenix was just a small farm town back then. Its population was only 48,000 people, compared to over 1.6 million people in the city of Phoenix today. Phoenix covered just over 6 square miles. Along with its small town size came a small town's strict moral code. The Phoenix Chamber of Commerce promoted it as a city of homes, schools, and churches, the latter of which it had 80. Jana Boomersbach put it this way in her book, The Trunk Murderess, Winnie Ruth Judd, quote, Phoenicians found it both necessary and easy to ignore the ugly underbelly of their town, pretending there was no prostitution when it was a thriving cottage industry, pretending there was no political corruption when it was rampant, pretending men never strayed and women never wandered when it was an infamous tradition. It was a far cry from the town she grew up in, but Ruth was determined to make it work. She found a job as a medical secretary at the Grunow Clinic. It was here that Ruth met Agnes Leroy, who went by Anne, and by extension, met Hedvig Samuelson, who went by Sammy. Anne was an x-ray technician, and Sammy had been a teacher before her tuberculosis made her too ill to work. The pair had met in Alaska and moved down to Phoenix together in hopes of improving Sammy's health. The three of them quickly became the closest of friends. Others would describe them as inseparable. Ruth was nearly always at their bungalow and even lived with them for a time. The three girls were known for hosting frequent parties where some of Phoenix's most prominent businessmen would often find themselves. These men were known as summer bachelors because during the summers, they would send their wife and children up north out of the heat, and they would stay down in Phoenix, free to do whatever they wanted, which often meant infidelity. Before finding her place with Anne and Sammy, before finding a job at the Grunow Clinic, Ruth worked as a live-in caregiver to the prominent Lee Ford family. They were Phoenix elite. It was through them that Ruth would meet another member of the Phoenix elite, lumber magnate Jack Halloran. Jack was one of the richest and most powerful men in Phoenix. He was also one of the most well-connected. He was friendly with politicians, attorneys, and judges in the kind of way that if he wanted something done, it would get done, or if he wanted something buried. Despite the fact that he and Ruth were both married, they became smitten and developed a secret relationship. This affair had been going on for 10 months. Ruth had no idea just yet of the incredible impact Jack would come to have on her life. She had no idea that by the morning of Saturday, October 17th, 1931, her two best friends would both be dead. And she had no idea that by Monday evening, she would be at the center of a nationwide manhunt as the #1 suspect for their murders. In the next episode, I will detail the brutal murders and failed cover-up that earned Ruth the nickname the Trunk Murderess. For the final 2 episodes in this series, I will hand it over to my friend Lynette, who has a personal connection to the case. She will cover the disgraceful handling of evidence, a trial that brought more questions than answers, and how all of this would haunt Ruth for the rest of her life. Be sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss this.